blacksmith today. In this furnace just behind me here, I have 100 ounces of gold heating up. Very shortly that gold is going to be melting down. I'm going to cast that into an ingot right here. Now I'll explain a little bit about the job of the industrial blacksmith whilst that gold heats up. Our job is basically to refine, purify gold. Very important job because you need pure gold, 99.9% pure, which is 24 karat gold. Regardless of whether you're mining alluvial gold or gold-bearing quartz, which is this stone here, you are never going to find pure gold. It's always got silver, generally copper, and various other elements in that gold. So if you need to extract the gold from the quartz, you'll then hand it over to us. We'll cast it into nice, neat, pure ingots. You can sell those, make your fortune, we get paid, and everyone's happy. Now, before we get our hands on your quartz, on your gold I should say, you obviously need to extract it from the quartz. To do that, you are going to have to crush your quartz into a very fine sand like such, finer the better. Now that crushing process occurs in the battery directly opposite our doors. You need pretty heavy duty equipment because this stuff is rather hard and reasonably tough, and you will have to crush vast quantities of it. So the Stamper battery is effectively a set of giant steel hammers. Pounds of quartz into the sand will then be washed out, and amongst various other processes it will be washed over plates, tables coated in mercury. Now this mercury is a very unusual metal. It's a liquid, it's room temperature, bright silvery liquid. It has a very strong chemical affinity with gold. So that sand will wash over the top of these plates, that will go to waste. The gold particles in the sand will stick to the mercury, combined with that mercury, that forms what we call amalgam. Now the amalgam is a thick silvery paste. That will be scraped off the plates. I will hand that over to me. The very first thing that I need to do is remove that mercury from the gold using one of these cast iron retorts. It's called a mercury retort, nice imaginative name for it. So basically a cast iron bowl, we place the amalgam in, a lid and a tube. So I bolt that lid and tube on the top. Once that's together, we drop that whole device into a fire. When the temperature in there reaches a little bit over 350 degrees Celsius, that mercury will boil, vapour makes its way down that tube. Once that boils off, we have our gold. At this point the gold is impure, and there's a couple of issues with this process. So that mercury is expensive, but it's also very, very toxic. So the company doesn't want me to lose their expensive mercury. If I inhale that mercury, I'll start to go insane, my teeth will fall out, and I will die really rather horribly of Mad Hatter's disease or mercury poisoning. Anyone keen on being an industrial blacksmith? It's paid very well too. Now to get around this little issue, because we don't normally have much enthusiasm for the job, you use a bucket such as that one on the floor. If I fill that with water, poke that tube in and bubble the mercury through, the vast majority of that thing condenses. So liquid mercury goes back over through the battery, they recycle it, they save a lot of money, and I get to live and work for several years before I start to go bad. When I take our still impure gold from the bottom of that retort, I'll place that gold into a crucible like this one, made of clay and graphite. So these crucibles are basically just a high temperature bowl. Into that, with the gold, I'll add various different chemicals, and I'll heat that whole mass to 1,200 degrees Celsius. So that is very, very hot metal, to say the least. The gold melts at 1,064 degrees. As that gold melts, those chemicals oxidise, strip out the impurities, they float to the surface, they form what we refer to as a slave glass. I'll then pour our hopefully nice and pure gold into one of these cast iron moulds. So that is a 100 ounce cast iron ingot mould there. I've heated to several hundred degrees, and that helps stop the mould from cracking when I pour the gold in it. It also helps release the gold once it's solidified. It's a bit easier to get out of the mould afterwards. I'm going to be pouring gold very, very shortly. If anyone wishes to take a photo of the gold pour itself, prepare your cameras. Gold pouring is a very quick process once I get started. It is very important that no one comes onto the bricks here whilst I pour. If you've got any little people with you, just hang on to them, because in the very unlikely event that I splash this gold, a drop of that lands upon you, it will burn through and come out the other side. Hence the away from Kevlar gloves. These are traditionally asbestos, these are Kevlar lined wool. Leather spats, which is a flap on the boot, thick leather apron and thick woolen clothing. But gold will still burn through that, it slows it down a bit. Stops us catching fire, which is always handy. That gold's gone from a bright orange to a bright yellowy white colour. It's a very subtle colour change, but that is the indicator it is hitting the 1200 degree mark. That gives me sufficient time to pour the gold and finish the job before it starts to solidify. Here we have 1200 degree pure liquid gold. Excellent sound effects from the crowd there too. So that is still a little bit over 1000 degrees on the inside of that crucible. Now gold is a very good conductor of heat. It's actually one of the very best conductors of heat. The gold that is poured is very rapidly transferring its heat into the mould. That has dropped to around about the 900 degree mark. That's as solid as a rock, just as quickly as that. 900 degrees, it's a fairly impressively toasty bar of gold. It's 9 times the boiling point of water, most certainly not something you want to be handling for quite a while. Now that would make quite a good souvenir if you tripped yourself at a gold bar, but if you were to slip that in your pocket now, I'll have a little demonstration as to pretty much what would happen to your entire hand with my fingers should you pick it up. That's a piece of pine, it's not cut from our workshop. I can guarantee you would put that down very, very quickly should you try to pick it up. That gold's going to take about 2.5 hours, maybe a wee bit longer, if I leave it sitting on this bench before it's safe to handle. So I'm going to drop the gold into this water bath. I should be able to pick that up in around about 40 seconds without losing fingers. So that piece of gold should be safe to handle right about now. Now you may be able to see the water level in there just about level at the top of that gold bar. We'll try to keep the water level around about that point because it allows a lot of the heat to transfer into the air. So it cools the gold very quickly, keeps the water nice and cool, and very importantly here at least it sounds good when you drop it in there. So that is about room temperature, about 20 to 25 degrees. And that's a it is already quite cool and quite safe to handle. And that is 100 troy ounces, 99.99% pure gold. So the troy ounce, 31.1 grams, quite a bit heavier than standard or imperial ounce, which is 28.4. So a little bit over 3 kilos pure gold. Australian dollars at today's price, you're looking at a little bit over $235,000 for that bar there. Not a bad price to say the least for a relatively small bar of gold. Now once I'd finished with this, we'd weigh this gold, we'd stamp the weight on it in troy ounces and grains, we'd assay the gold, that's testing purity. We need to make sure it is 999 parts out of 1,000 minimum. That would be sold and hopefully we made a fortune. This bar of gold I'm not going to sell because we have several more gold pours to do for the rest of the day. Now that happens in here generally about 10 times a day. We do 8 to 10 gold pours a day in this room every day except for Christmas Day. We have now been doing that with this very same piece of gold since 1992. That has been poured tens of thousands of times. As you can see, it stays the same beautiful yellow, shiny, heavy metal. Gold's a very stable, pure element, so it will never change. We do lose a tiny, tiny bit of weight. So every pour, there's microscopic grains that jump out, tiny little bit of gold vapour. Pour by pour, it's almost insignificant, tiny, tiny quantities, but over the years it does build up. Usually every 4 or 5 years, we'll have a very small amount of gold that tops us up. So amazing material. Now gold is still being mined on an enormous scale around Australia. We're actually the second biggest producer of gold in the world, behind China, and we're by far the world's largest exporter of gold bullion. Total Australian gold production last year was 300 tonnes bit over 300 tonnes. It's been up around the 300 tonne mark for a very long time now, and hopefully will continue to be so for quite a while to come. Ballarat is a smaller producer, but we do still have one quite significant working mine, about 2.5 kilometres down that direction to the south of us. So that mine accesses an area directly underneath where you're sitting. They're currently mining half a kilometre underneath this building. North of the Gold Museum in that direction, they're down over 800 metres deep there and getting deeper all the time. Last year they produced around 45,000 ounces of gold. So when you consider that's a 100-ounce bar there, you can imagine how impressive 45,000 ounces stack up would be. There's vast amounts of gold still in the ground right around the country, so hopefully we'll be mining for a long time to come. Now, if anyone has any questions about anything to do with gold, I'm going to head through those doors into the shop next door, so please feel free to come through and have a bit of a chat with either Ray or myself. We both like to talk about gold. Thanks for coming along. Unfortunately, I don't have any free samples of gold today, but I hope you'll enjoy the demonstration. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.